What not to do during a divorce. Welcome to the Stephanie Young Law Podcast, hosted by me, Stephanie Young. I'm a family law litigation attorney in Covington, Georgia, with a passion for being my client's biggest legal ally. If you find this content relevant and you want to hear more, I just ask that you subscribe, share, and interact by liking and commenting down below. Today's episode, we are going to dive into what mistakes parties make during the pendency of their divorce. So, the goal here is for me to kind of spill the tea a little bit on what preventable mistakes others have made so you don't have to. If you have any friends that are going through a divorce or you think might soon, feel free to share this content with them this episode. I think that they will find it hopefully lighthearted, but about a serious topic. So there's a lot of advice out there, right? Family law is a very relevant area of the law, which is what I love about it, right? It keeps, obviously, as a business owner, it keeps the cases moving, obviously. But it also is good in a way in terms of you get input, it's relatable that you've got someone that, it's not an area of law that you might never deal with. Most people, especially in today's world, are going to have some interaction with divorce court in some way, whether that be a friend or a family member or themselves. So there is a lot of advice out there, and that can be not so great if you do not have the right tools to be able to decipher through that information. So what I'm getting at is the advice that's out there is not all from legal professionals. I would say most of it's not from legal professionals. Lucky for you, today's episode is coming from an attorney, a legal professional. Now, I disclose this throughout my episodes, but I am licensed in the state of Georgia. So my advice and my knowledge is coming from the state of Georgia. It's very, tailored to each state. So I just want you to keep that perspective. So although, again, some of the information that's out there, it can be helpful. I am not going to be the kind of attorney that just, kind of scoffs at any advice out there. I think that it's important to, have a support system when you are going through any kind of family law matter, and a support system that's not just your attorney, right? You need that emotional support, sometimes financial support, and just kind of someone to be able to, or multiple people, to be able to vent and kind of get some feedback on. So I'm not going to scoff at, the fact that there's some advice out there by any means. I don't think that the only avenue that you should look to for advice, of course, is the social media world, or even your friends and family. Just like I don't think the only avenue that you should seek advice is from your lawyer, because there's going to be emotional aspects, financial aspects that your lawyer, can only give you so much advice on, because you just don't know them as well as maybe a close friend or family member. So again, although some of this stuff can be very helpful that you see online, I frequently personally see a lot of false information that is spread, whether that be on social media pages. Mainly that's where I'm seeing it, but also just verbal conversations. It can be very hard to decipher between what's accurate and what's not. It really can. Because some advice can sound intuitive, right? And it's really, the legal advice is not in support of that. So that's the purpose of today's episode. This is really the meat and potatoes as to why I started this podcast. So I do have an earlier episode that you can go back to, one of my first ones that talks about and really delves deep, a little bit of a personal episode there that talks about why I started this podcast. And you'll see in that that part of that is to be able to empower people that are able to be knowledgeable about the information moving forward, are going to be able to be making better decisions for themselves. Because again, people that are empowered, I find, are able to better protect their peace. And you will hear this from me, peace is priceless. So let's play a game. I thought it would be fun to kind of come on here and make it a game. So we're going to do fact or fiction. We're going to debunk. I see those like science shows. I'm not good at science at all. So I'm one of those people that find that fascinating because things that I thought would be fact are definitely not. So let's do this, and a game that I think I'm actually good at. So with fact or fiction, but in the legal world with family law. So First one, biggest one that I got in terms of when I threw this question out here to viewers about what do you think is advice, or what advice have you heard from other people about going through a divorce? What's on there? Where have you heard the advice? Social media. Okay. Social media, it's safe to post. Like, you can, if you're going through, like, we'll start there. If you're going through a divorce, it's safe to post what you want on social media. It's just social media. It's not, maybe I've even heard, it's not admissible in court. No one goes on there. Like, social media world is not your real life. Maybe there's some disconnect. They'll never find you. You can use a different username and you'll never be found, by the attorney or by your ex or whatever. Oh, this is fiction, right? Comment down below. Did you get that right? I hope. Definitely fiction. So, when it comes to social media, you absolutely should be mindful. I actually have my paralegal, help me and go on social media and try to track down not only opposing party, but also my client, right? It is very important. And it's not, in terms of, it really just depends as far as the timeline of how far back. If you're going through a divorce, I would say it's probably more relevant from just before the separation, to present. Unless there's any kind of adultery, then that's a different story. But if we're talking about, maybe you did drugs 10 years ago and you were taking pictures, smoking blunts, but that's 10 years ago, you guys were married and maybe you both were doing it. I don't care about that stuff. Okay. But if we've got, if you've got pictures of, and this is real life, oh my goodness, of real cases that I've dealt with. If you've got pictures of you going on a tropical vacation with your mistress, while your kids were at home and the house was going into foreclosure, that's really going to look really bad. And it's coming into court. So I'm telling you, I know, get you a good attorney and it's going to come in. I get social media posts in all the time, in terms of against other parties. We just get, there's, many ways we can do that, even if it's under a different a username, whatever that may be. And social media, I'm talking about the big ones: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all those sorts of things. If you're on it, we're going to be able to find it more than likely, because what's crazy? You think, oh, I've got this account and it's private, so definitely I'm safe. Plus, I'm only going to post a story and stories disappear after 24 hours. Or if it's like Snapchat, whatever, it's quicker. Well, it's funny because I actually know one of your mutual friends and they are somehow feeding me information. It is wild. The world is so small. It is wild how I get information. I'm not going to disclose my sources, but they're out there. So we get it. And you can also do third-party subpoena requests, to social media, and sometimes get them that way. Honestly, it's easier for me I find it easier, and I just end up getting it from these other kind of sources of people that are mutual friends, and maybe you piss them off. I don't know, but I get it. So it's awesome. Don't even have to pay a private investigator. So just keep that in mind in terms of if you're going through a divorce. I'm not saying get rid of your social media, by no means, but also less is more. You don't have to go on there and talk bad about your spouse. Even if they are horrible, let's go to court with it. Let's show them up in court, or maybe just keep it into your book club and venting, right? Or texting your best friend. The whole world does not need to know. And when you're putting it on social media, remember that is for the whole world. I don't care if your account's private. I don't care. It's for the whole world. You can go ahead and assume it. Okay, so we move on to the next one. Let's see if you do better on this one. Moving out of the marital residence will forfeit your claim to any equity you have in it. So let me kind of break that down just to give you a fair shot at the question. If I leave the house because I'm really over living with this horrible person that is almost my ex-spouse, then that's going to make me get rid of all my right to that house. It's basically me saying, here's all the $100,000 equity, it's yours. So I just have to sit put and be miserable. Fiction. Did you get it right or did you get it wrong? I will say that one's a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder because it sounds like, well, you need to stay. And I've heard this a lot. I've seen this on social media. Oh no, you better stay in that house because, if you don't, then they're going to get to keep that house and you're not going to get any custody of the kids and blah, blah, blah. No. And it is, again, family law, just like every area of the law, is very fact specific in terms of your exact case, which is why you should always consult with a local experienced attorney. But, as far as generic advice of what we're talking about, that's fiction. What I will weigh, I will always go in and ask you things like, if your mental health is suffering so severely by being miserable in that house, leave. If you've got somewhere safe to go, leave. We can figure things out in terms of at a temporary hearing, we can figure some things out in terms of who's paying the bills and if, for example, maybe you'll get a little bit of child support if you're leaving with the kids or we'll work things out. But if it's to the point of you feel, and I mean this in all seriousness, if you feel like you're going to be suicidal, and people can laugh about this unless you've been in this situation. I have seen it. If you're at the point where your mental health is being interfered in a negative way because you are residing in that house and you have other options, you don't have to wait for the court to say, okay, you're good, you can leave, because that could be months. That could be over a year. That once you speak with an attorney, you're not foregoing your equity in the house just because you're leaving. Now, again, there's nuances like, are you just saying, hey, okay, well, I'm out, I found my own place, so I'm paying my new mortgage, and I guess you can come up with that mortgage on your own. No, you still have to maintain the status quo. If you watch other episodes, you're going to hear me harp on that word status quo. What does it mean? It means you've got to maintain what you were doing before you hated each other's guts. You got to keep doing it now. That's what I mean. So, if you can't afford the rent at the new place and contributing to the bills like you were before, then you probably do need to stay there for a little bit until we can get in front of a judge. That is the reality of that. But if it means that you're going to sleep on a friend's couch for your mental health, and you're still okay with maintaining the status quo with paying the bills and, your portion of the bills at the marital residence, do it, because mental health matters. And so, I would say, so going back to the original question, you don't forfeit equity. That's fiction just because you left. But kind of a sub question to this, what if the kids are involved? Then are you forfeiting any kind of custody rights or visitation rights by leaving the marital residence? I'm going to say that's a fact. Okay. Again, this is very detail specific, case specific, but overall I'm going to say yes, because if you're going to, and I'm using examples, I learn better by examples. So I'll say this, imagine, and this is intuitive. Imagine that you've got two kids, they're in elementary school, so they ride the bus every day, that sort of thing. And you're like, I cannot stand this spouse. I don't want to live another day with this spouse. So you want to go live with your mom in the next county over. Okay, that's good and dandy, right? But you've got to maintain the status quo, which means you don't need to be pulling those children. You definitely don't need to pull your kids out and say, come on, we're going to grandma's house to live, for 1 night, 2 nights, if we can work that out, but not to actually move there. That would not be maintained in the status quo. And without an agreement in writing signed or a court order, you are going to face repercussions when you get in front of a judge for doing those types of actions. So, you're going to say, well, the kids will stay, but I've got to go. I gotcha. I hear you. But if you're then planning to say, well, I want to be the primary parent and I'll just come back in 6 months and ask the court for that, but you haven't been there every day for their needs and to help take care of them, the judge is going to laugh at you. That is not, you've basically got to start acting like what you want in the long run as much as you can. So, if my clients are fine with saying, well, and if I just want long weekends with every other weekend or something like that for the kids, that's fine. Then I'm going to say, okay, we can probably work that out where go to your mom's house. You can move. The kids will stay in the marital residence. You'll still, help contribute to the bills, maintain the status quo. And, we'll just work it out to where the kids come with you to, your mom's house, to grandma's house every other weekend. We'll start working it that way. That's great. But if you're trying to say all of a sudden, well, then I want primary physical custody and we're going to move their schools. No, you're jumping way too fast. And if, that's your goal, then you just need to stay in the marital residence. So that's kind of a nuance to that question. Next question, we're going to talk about money. With divorces, what you do, the biggest, again, is social media, and I would say money. What you're doing with money, it's a big deal. People make some terrible decisions while they are going through a divorce financially that is really hard to overcome and come back from. So this is the question on our game show. Hiding money is always a bad idea. Fact. Did you get it right? I think you probably did. I believe in you. That one, it's a little bit easier, right? Hiding money is always a bad idea. I'll give you a little clue. When they give you in law school, when you're taking the bar exam, if it's a question and there's something in the law and it's very like specific, like always, if you use the word always or never, it's probably wrong. Again, I use like a probably, but it's true. It's probably not the correct answer. Because that's such a jump to say it's always or it's never. The law is a very gray area on a lot of things, not everything. So hiding money is always a bad idea. That's a fact. I am actually very vocal to this about this idea with my clients. I have fired clients for not listening. I'm not trying to scare you away, but I'm just being honest. I have fired clients for doing this very thing. I am not going to stand up and advocate and by making up purposeful lies that I know are lies in front of the judge under oath. I am an officer of the court. I'm not doing that. So I'm not doing that for you. Maybe I'm sure another lawyer will. I'm not. So, that's kind of where I start. So my clients know from the get-go that we are going to be honest with me so that I can be honest to the court about the information that we are providing under oath. So the reason is, okay, why is this a bad idea? Like, okay, Stephanie, I get it. That's your bar license. But what about me? If I hide money, that just helps me. No, it doesn't. And let me tell you why. And I've seen it play over so many times. You don't win. I've never seen anyone win from this. Again, never. Maybe I know people probably do, but it's just not worth it. Let me tell you what the risk is. Okay. Why is it a bad idea? Well, it's a bad idea because when we do this thing called discovery, where we exchange documents, and if you want an episode a little bit more about discovery, it's a huge part of divorces and family law. So let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, so, and my paralegal who absolutely loves discovery, she's like a discovery pro, sifting through, organizing, that sort of thing. She loves that stuff. She would love to help me with that episode. So comment down below if you want to see that. Anyways, I've seen it backfire, right? So when we do discovery, when we exchange discovery, it's going to be discovered. Whether you probably don't even think, you're like, no, I'm so smart. This is so hidden. No, as lawyers, we've been doing, family law, we see all the things in terms of how you try to hide things. We see it. I'll go on and I've found properties that is under a business name that you didn't even know, like that we knew that you had this business. Never mind that the business owned a property out of state or even out of the country. Wild. We find it out. I'm not going to disclose like my secrets of how I do that. Just I guess those are confidential, right? But again, it backfires. We figure it out. And again, I'm not sitting here saying I'm completely special. There's other good attorneys out there that do that too. So they're going to find it out. I'm almost always going to tell you that they will figure it out. And if I figure it out, bye, hasta la vista, you're not my client no more. And again, I joke about this because it's not something that's common. But again, it is serious. I'm not going to advocate for someone to lie under oath. But also think about this, because think about this as well, where I've also seen it backfire. Let's say that they don't discover it, and me either. I don't realize that you're lying and trying to get me to lie under oath. Guess what happens? And I've also seen this happen. When we do child support calculations, let's say it's an unknown, but then I've got information like, or maybe opposing counsel has information like, well, I know that you just bought a yacht last year. So yeah, maybe I don't know all your income because you're hiding it or it's cash flow and you're not disclosing it or whatever. But I do know enough information to make me be able to convince the court that you're making X amount of money. And then, so we call that imposing income. I've got a child support episode that I delve a lot into on a few previous episode on this podcast, talking about imposing imputed income. So if you want to kind of tune into that to learn a little bit more about that, but the court can impute income where we're like, okay, this is a kind of a educated guess, if you will, and to say that, this is probably what you make. Okay. You're saying under oath this, okay, whatever, I'm going to impose this amount, and the court can do that. And so that's what I've also seen happen, where it's like, so then and what if what's imposed is what if the reality, you actually are hiding this income, but it's less than what's now imposed on you. I've seen it happen. So then you're really in trouble when it comes to child support. And I'll also go into this, that even if it's not discovered, because if it is discovered that you're lying to the court is then not going to believe anything you say. Like you think that you're being smug and all that, but then the court's all of a sudden going to use that against you and not award you. The court could, within their discretion, potentially not award you anything. If you're lying to the court, they're going to say, well, who knows what else you're lying about. So that's kind of the danger that you pose if it's discovered. If it's not discovered, let's say you do a settlement agreement and you're like, I have this like 401k that's got all this money in it and it's definitely marital property, but I'm just going to not talk about it. And I've never talked about it. And you know what? We're just going to agree. So we're not doing full discovery. Okay. That I'm putting in there that I don't say anything about the 401k. So then I just keep it. Okay. But think about this. Most settlement agreements, especially, again, this is more reason why you should hire good counsel. Most settlement agreements will include language in there that basically states that, this is all contingent on the fact that the parties have been forthcoming. Maybe different language, but that's basically what we mean. That this agreement is contingent on the fact that everything was disclosed. If it's later found out, even if, it's 5 years later, 10 years later, that, oh, you did have a 401k and you weren't honest about it, that could be grounds to then set aside that settlement agreement later on. So again, another risk of your peace being disrupted. So it is, again, I'm just going to keep reiterating, it's so important to hire knowledgeable counsel just to cover all those bases. As far as a kind of a subcategory, because, most lawyers, we always like to, maybe we always like to add a little bit to cover our butt, so to speak. I'm going to say but. This was another category where I'm going to say there's another but. Having control over your income is not the same thing as hiding income. Okay. So again, I'm big on empowering people. And what I mean by that is don't set yourself up for failure. If you have a joint account with your spouse and all of your income is going into that, like it's just direct deposit, your entire paycheck is always going in there. Sure. Status quo means that you've got to keep maintaining and paying what you were before you hated each other. Right. But it doesn't mean that you have to have that money keep going into that joint account, because what could happen, and I've seen it frequently, is that the other party drains that account. Now, is that something that we can file, to get into court on and get you your money, get that money recovered? Yeah. It'll take time though. And in the meantime, you don't have money to pay your bills because that money was just drained. And until we go into court to try to get it back, what are you supposed to do? So it's just the practical side of things. I always try to equip my clients with the practical knowledge behind the legal knowledge, for reasons just like that. The standing order says, don't do that, Johnny. Like, don't take that money because it's not your money and you've got to maintain the status quo. But the reality is but they could, like, an order, again, I just kind of keep trying to remind people this, that an order is just that. It is an order. Now, there's definitely ways we can enforce that, but it's going to take time, and the legal process can be not as quick as you want it to be and need it to be when you've got bills to pay and kids to feed. So empowering yourself by saying, okay, I'm going to open up my own account that I will disclose in discovery. I'm not hiding the fact that I've opened this individual account in my own name, but it's about empowering myself and taking control of my money to make sure that it's not drained. That is different. So, I just want to kind of have that caveat to hiding money isn't the same as maintaining control over your money. Okay, are we ready for the next question? It is okay to date once you are separated. I'll give you time to answer. Fiction. Okay, fiction. And again, this one does have some big caveats, and it's also changed over the years, big time. So it used to be like of course, fiction, like, no, like that's adultery. Let's kind of backpedal. So it depends largely on time. If I've got clients that have been separated, you'd be surprised, for like a decade. They've been separated for a decade. They're married, but they've been separated for like a decade, living apart, whatever. And then all of a sudden they're like, and people do this for health insurance reasons. That's one. I'm not supporting or condoning it. I'm just stating a fact that, there's different reasons, personal reasons why people just don't get divorced or they just don't get around to it, but they're separated and then they come and they want a divorce, and that's fine. And in those situations, I'm going to say it's probably not relevant. You know, like if you've been separated a decade and you've been dating somebody else, you know, mind you, don't tell me that you're remarried, because you can't do that. You know, that your new marriage would be invalid. But anyway, if you're still married, but if you're dating in a relationship and you've been separated for a long period of time, you know, more likely than not, the other party is too dating somebody else, and it's really kind of moot. Like, who cares at that point? So I will preface that. But if you've got like obvious scenarios where it's like, you know, yeah, we've been, you know, we're separated 2 months ago, you know, and I'm dating somebody else. What I will say is that, you know, it really, again, even that does depend. Like depends what you're fighting over. You have to think about, when will that become relevant? So if the reason for the separation wasn't that new thing you got going on, so like you guys separated and, you know, even moved out and didn't even file yet, but that's what you've done, and that was not the reason for the divorce. It was just you just didn't get along, or you know, there's 13 grounds for divorce in Georgia. So, you know, in terms of maybe it's one of those other grounds and it's not adultery, then that's a little different. It's better. It's way better, because then it's like, okay, you know, that they can't come then later and say, oh, this new thing is why we're not together. Well, it's kind of hard to say that when you've already you filed divorce or you've been separated, and that was long before this relationship existed, right? So there's that. But also, it really does depend on the judge as well, because although that's legally can't be held against you in terms of what adultery, the word adultery means, which typically plays a role when you're asking for alimony, things like that. Adultery can be a strict bar on receiving alimony. So that, you know, that's just some nuance aspect. It can still, judges have a lot of control, a lot of leeway, as far as to determine what's equitable to them. And so, you know, they could just not like that. They could be more old school. And I'm not commenting on, I'm not trying to insert my own personal opinion on this. I'm just stating the facts that, you know, the judge that you have specifically assigned to your case, if that, you know, some judges would, if the other side tried to bring up, oh, you're in a new relationship, we could object for relevance, right? And then try to make them argue. And the judge is like, yeah, that's irrelevant. That's not, you know, I don't see any claim for adultery. Who cares? Move along. Let's get this going. But I have other judges that I go in front of that would absolutely care and be like, relevant. It's absolutely relevant. We're here for a divorce hearing. Of course it's relevant if they're dating somebody else. I haven't signed a final order, you know, and so it really just, it depends. That's that magic word, right? Anyway, so let's jump to the next one. Okay, so your spouse is being cordial. Good, that sounds good. So you think it's a good idea to sign a settlement agreement without counsel. I'll give you a moment. I should have that music. Do, 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 do. The Jeopardy. Okay, that's false. And I know you're like, of course, you're probably rolling your eyes at me. You're an attorney. Of course, you're saying that, you know, you're always going to try to get a plug in for yourself. But no, honestly, I mean, I'm also, you know, I'm here on a podcast giving you, you know, some just really as a friend. I let you come in, you know, you're here in my office bi-weekly. I feel like we're friends now, right? I'm going to tell you, I'm spitting it to you straight. I'm going to tell you honestly that is a really bad idea. What I have absolutely learned in the last decade of litigating, specifically family law, which means I interact with so many people, is that people can be so deceitful. I know that's not what necessarily, you know, we all want to hear, but it's true. People can be so deceitful. Even that person that you have been in love with for 20 years and you feel like you know so much and you just don't get along and you want a divorce and they're being so nice and cordial. Even then, oh my goodness, even then I have seen just deceit, just really bad deceit. The problem is that you think that they're being genuine. It's really just it's a tactic, right? And I know that's not what people like to hear. It's like, oh, we have enough bad news in the world and all this. I really don't need to jump on this podcast and hear you tell me how people are, you know, self-serving and selfish and, you know, tactical and they're not genuine. It's true though. They're not. And so, right. And so you really, and maybe they are, right? But if they are, then you saying, hey, awesome. I love that we're getting along. Give me 10 days. We've been married for insert however long. And so having 10 days to be able to make this big decision on how we divide these things, everyone deserves that, right? If they start like trying to back out and saying, you know what? No, if you don't sign tomorrow, the deal's off, then you know what you say? Okay, I guess it's off. Do it. I promise you. I have never seen, and look at me, I'm doing an extreme word there. Never seen a deal that could not wait 10 days as far as a settlement agreement before, that would really make that big of a difference. So if that's what's happening, that's automatically giving you red flags to say, oh, this is too good for them, not for me. There's something that I'm not thinking about because I didn't go to law school. Let me consult with somebody that has and go over this. And that does not mean, that, like if you consult with me, I do this frequently. Consulting does not mean that you've been retained, doesn't mean that your spouse even has to be made aware of who you consulted with or that you consulted. But just saying, I need 10 days to sit on it. If they won't give that to you to find, again, in that 10 days, what I would expect you to do is to find independent counsel to just sit down, go over the paperwork with you, meet with you, and tell you, what's all right, what's not. And even if it's fine. And I've also seen paperwork like that where I'm like, there's some little tweaks, but that I would add, but overall it's pretty solid. Then it's worth it. Just 10 days. And then, just to do that, it's going to be worth it. And I will remind you again, I've mentioned this previously, but because I've done an episode on custody modifications, and child support modifications, but debt and property division in Georgia is not modifiable from a divorce. So you are this isn't something where it's like, well, if it's not fair on its face, then surely I can get out of it later. No, unless it goes back to something like I said earlier, where someone was not being forthcoming. But if they're being forthcoming and they're just, it's not that they're hiding anything, but it's just not fairly, you could have done way better is what I like to say. If we were to litigate it, or if you had counsel to mediate it or, or work it out on your behalf, to advocate for you on your behalf, then you are stuck with it if you're in Georgia. And so that's a problem. And you could really be screwing yourself out of quite a lot of money to keep that in mind. So let's go to a next question. Okay. I tried to come up, I know there's a lot. So, just bear with, there's a lot of other ones. And I'm hoping to I was hoping to just capture the most frequently asked questions, the most popular questions. So here's another one. It's okay to take on new debt once you're separated. I'm separated. I can do what I want. I make money. I'm paying those bills still. Hey, I'm still doing the status quo thing, but I make some money. I can do what I want with my money, with the other money I have. I can take on some new debt. Put your answers down below. Fiction. Yeah, fiction. Unless, come on, this is going to be funny. I think this is hilarious. Unless it's attorney fees. Swipe the card, pay me, go ahead. That's new debt. I don't care. Whatever credit card, go on. No, I did. I think that was funny. But I do say that, that is actually a caveat of that's kind of a status quo, expense, right? Or I'll argue all day. You need me. So it's not like, buying a new car, you need an attorney. That's life or death, right? So anyway, but no, really, fiction. You don't need to take on new debt. Let's kind of talk about why. Discovery requests for loan documents. That's my favorite. If I find out that your spouse, maybe they just got a new car or something, I love to then request in the discovery those loan documents. Because you're like, why? What does it matter? It's debt, especially if it's a car, right? Because it's not like anybody, it's very hardly ever you're going to see where the car is worth more than what you paid for it. It's kind of negative, right? He can take that debt if there's not worth it more than what it's owed. This is what I love. I love to see how inflated they put their income on that loan application. Are we guilty? Are other people guilty of this? I hear you. I get it. You're like, I really want this loan amount. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to really make that income sparkle and shine. I'm really going to make it seem like I'm going to use my good income. I'm going to put my best year of the last the last few years. I'm going to put my best year yet on there, because it's not lying. Like, I did make that, and I'm going to put that on the loan application because I really want to be approved, right? But when it comes to child support, oh, no, ma'am. Sometimes I get overtime, but really that was not this check. So let's use this check, because this check I went on, I was out of town, and, and I didn't work a lot of hours, and there's no overtime. Come on now, y'all. We are not stupid. Nice try, but honestly, I love to go on there and to get that. So just keep in mind that if you're doing that, it's probably going to go against you if you're not being honest, and if you're going through divorce. Another reason, right? There are no financial guarantees. So this goes back to practical knowledge that I try to, kind of throw in there. People can get so consumed in when I say people, I mean lawyers. We can get so consumed with what the law is, and the law says this and that. But what about the practical? It is a disservice to our clients to not be also kind of putting in the applicable aspect of the law into our advice. And so, there's no financial guarantees until there's a financial order signed by the judge, or there's a signed settlement agreement that eventually will be incorporated into a final decree, which is an order signed by the judge. So without that signed final order, you don't have any financial guarantees. I can say, hey, this is probably what's going to happen. This is probably going to be the child support amount. This is probably, and again, I'm normally right? Like, I'm a good lawyer, but there's no financial guarantees. It's not going to be a guarantee. No attorney can look at you and say, yep, this is definitely what it's going to be. They can't do that. If they're doing that, run. They can't do that. Probably, that's a good word. More likely than not, should. My legal advice is this is what it'll look like, but it's not a guarantee. And so, personally, in terms of my finances, I don't want to go take on new debt until I know what my financial future is going to look like. Not might look like, what it's going to look like. And so that's another just practical reason why you should not take on, new debt once you're separated. Also, just because you're still married doesn't mean that the spouse is going to be responsible for that debt. So if you were thinking, well, let me do it now while we're still married, because just like if I go and buy something that's valuable, even if we're separated, that other party could come after it. Watch, I keep giving some plugs. I can't help it. I'm gonna give you a plug to my episode 7 of my podcast, The Divided House. That was a really fun episode to do with Kayla Clack, licensed real estate agent. And I go into talking about how, you don't want to buy a new house even though you're separated until you get the final order, because if there's any equity there, that's still technically an argument that that's marital property. Same thing here, but with debt. I don't want you to think the reverse of just because it's marital debt, I'll use that argument and I'll say they can pay for half of it. No, courts are going to look at who benefited from the funds. So if you took on new debt because all of a sudden you paid for your child's soccer camp that they needed to go to, then maybe so we could make an argument to say, you were separated and you took on that debt, but who benefited? Well, your child did, and that's mutual. Both parents have a responsibility there. But if you took on new debt to buy a new car for yourself, or, just to kind of have a classy, flashy ride, it wasn't because you didn't have a car before, or you went on a vacation and you just racked up this money, the judge is not going to then impute that and say, well, yeah, it's marital debt. Well, it is marital debt, but you're going to be on the hook for that 100%. The judge is going to look at the source of, what those funds were used for, what that debt came from. The judge is also going to look at the control that the other party had in deciding whether or not to incur that debt. So if you just go and say, I'm just putting this on a credit card and never talk to your spouse about it, even if you guys are separated, and then expect them to pay for half of it, that also isn't going to be frowned upon and not going to be a great argument in court. So, I've had a lot of fun with this fact or fiction game. Let's keep playing in the comments. Let me know down below. I know there's probably a lot more advice out there that you've seen or heard that we haven't talked about. Put it in the comments. Let's talk about it. It's kind of fun to see how right or wrong maybe that you are. I see it, I'm on social media, and Stephanie Young Law is my business Facebook and podcast Facebook page and Instagram handle. Go on and follow me. That'd be great. But also just personally, and I see things in mom groups, and I love those. I go to mom groups for advice on other things, not legal related, but on other life things. And I see stuff on there and I kind of cringe, and I'm like, sometimes I'll post or I'll have friends that'll link my podcast episodes explaining why the comment that somebody just put is wrong. And I love that. I love to empower people with the knowledge. But don't let your friends, or even worse, social media strangers, debunk these do's and don'ts of going through a divorce, okay? Contact local experience counsel. If you are going through a divorce, or you're about to, or you're at risk of disrupting your peace, contact my office and we can set you up with a consultation, and you and I can discuss a plan for your particular circumstance. Peace is priceless and attainable. We've got this. Hey guys, I just wanted to jump on and give a disclosure that watching my videos does not create an attorney-client relationship. Also, the information that's contained within the videos is for educational purposes only. Thank you so much for watching.